Let's talk about Bloomberg, right? Now, it feels like the Bloomberg campaign, part of all of their strategy, right, was we'll sit out the first 4 states. We'll essentially, we've got so much money that name recognition means after those people had to work so hard to get noticed in Iowa, New Hampshire, then in Nevada, South Carolina, in Super Tuesday, where a third of the delegates are up, basically there was this multi-billion-dollar firewall from a bloke who at one point used to be a Republican. Now, Troy, what I am most fascinated about Bloomberg is, look, I get it. He's worked out. I've, bought as many yachts as I can, and I've lived in New York, and I'm a multi-billionaire. Bugger it. It's time to go off and have a run at the presidency. And, he has every right to disrupt the system as much as everyone else. But what is amazing is to watch a rich person slowly but surely gather people up by donations and favour, so that when you decide to run for president, when you get caught saying things like learning that a female employee had a baby, just kill it, or that when people are in their 90s and have cancer, they shouldn't have any sort of tax-funded health care, that you have people in the media who would have scandalised for weeks even half of these comments. Instead, they now find ways to explain them away. Such is the Trump derangement syndrome. What's your thought of Bloomberg as the answer to the Trump problem for lefties?
Well, 2 weeks ago on this program, Paul, I said that Bloomberg was the one to watch. He was surging, and that he would surge, and that's what looks like is happening. Look, he has gambled very heavily on the fact that he's not going to contest the first 4 caucuses or primaries. He's saving everything up for Super Tuesday in the first week of March. He's spending up big. He will have spent more than Barack Obama spent on his entire re-election campaign in 2012 by the time we get to Super Tuesday in only a few weeks' time. So that's more than $1 billion Australian that he's going to spend. Now, look, this is an untested notion. This is a risky prospect. He's seeking to disrupt the Democratic nominating process, just like Donald Trump did, also a billionaire from New York who had a long record of saying appalling things, but that didn't seem to matter to him. Of course, Trump was also a Democrat before he became a Republican, and Bloomberg was a Republican before he became a Democrat. So, in many ways, Trump is somewhat the model here. And that's interesting to ponder for a moment. But look, I'll finish with this point, Paul, is that I think the Democratic field, as I've said and written, is extremely weak. I don't think yet there's a lot of confidence that any of them can beat Donald Trump, although I think Donald Trump could be beaten, and I do think he is vulnerable for reasons we've talked about in the past. But that doesn't look like anyone's going to beat him yet. And so Bloomberg is the big unknown factor here. And I think that Bernie Sanders is a very weak front runner. He only came away with that New Hampshire primary with about 26 or 27% of the vote. That's the lowest of any eventual nominee in decades. So anything can happen. And the longer this goes on, the more likelihood I think there is of there being a contested and therefore brokered convention in Milwaukee in July, which is, a political nerd's dream. To see something like this happen, which hasn't happened, I don't think, since the 1950s.
But, Cory, what is most fascinating about Bloomberg is that he fails every one of the lefties' purity tests, yet they're going to turn around and march out and vote for him because his main thing is, I'm going to beat Donald Trump. And before people say, well, hang on, right-wingers were willing to do a Faustian pact with Donald Trump, remember what Donald Trump promised them. Conservative judges, tax cuts. He actually promised them some stuff. Bloomberg is promising nothing. But of course, isn't it interesting to watch the things that they tried to use as spears against Trump, they try to use as fence palings to build a wall around Bloomberg?
Well, this is the modus operandi of the left, and Paul, in your opening editorial, you described him as an oligarch. And that's exactly what he is. I mean, this is a bloke who controls tens of thousands of journalists. Reputedly, he's told them they're not allowed to report badly about him or positively about Trump. I think I got a notification just before we came to air from the Bloomberg app saying that he's going to appear in a debate on stage with other candidates, Democratic candidates, next week. I'm not sure about the details of it. But go through his track record. This is a guy who banned 32-ounce soft drinks in New York. In 2009, he He bullied the legislature to allow him to run for a third term as mayor of New York. He's spoken in terrible terms and like a bully and a megalomaniac to employees and others. He's a very flawed individual, but you know what? He's got $1 billion to spend. He's purporting to be a lefty, and that's all that it matters to the Democrats, who are morally bankrupt.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, Rita, is what I find most frustrating. Look, if you hate Donald Trump, you're probably going, oh, great, how good's this? A guy who's got more money is going to be able to run a super vague campaign and somehow make his way in. But hang on, you know, the left of politics is going to have to deeply contradict what they have said for the past 4 years, deeply contradict what they have been about for the past 10 years, to rally around a bloke who has said he's ticked all the boxes. He's offended old people, he's offended farmers, he's offended women. I mean, imagine honestly, now I get it, grab on the, you know, I get why that went off, but fair dinkum, kill it as a reaction to a woman having a baby at work.
Paul, I've got to say, I'm shocked that you think that the left would be even troubled by this. They've got nothing other than hypocrisy and double standards. They will look past all these indiscretions, if you want to call them, of Bloomberg's if he can beat Trump. They don't care about what he really stands for and what he's done in the past. If he's got enough money to invest in this campaign to be a real threat to Donald Trump, he is going to get the nomination. His odds have shortened dramatically, and it's going to be very interesting to see if it does end up going in the hands of the super delegates. But let's not forget, money isn't everything. In the last campaign, 2016 election, the Hillary Clinton campaign outspent Donald Trump almost 2-1 and still lost. Now, that is unusual. Normally the person who spends the most gets the best result, but it is not the only factor, and I think the entire impeachment farce has really energised the Trump base, and donations are pouring in there, so he's got a war chest to work with when he starts in earnest in the campaign. I think it's going to be fascinating.
Mark, does Bloomberg scare you at all,
No,
as the person?
No, not at all. In that, you know, there's in the hierarchy of lefty hatred in the United States, Trump obviously is number one, but number two is the 1%. You know, the rich, and Bloomberg's in the 0.1%. So, you know, my view is that the Sanders supporters, who are very much purists, they'll stay home rather than vote for Bloomberg. They're not going to support a billionaire as their standard bearer under any circumstance. So, no, I think he would split the Democratic Party down the middle. History tells us that with the American economy so strong, it's almost impossible to believe Trump could lose. There's no precedent for that post-World War II. And looking at the Democrats post-World War II, their tendency's always been to grab hold of younger, newer hopefuls, Kennedy, Carter, Clinton, Obama. And Bloomberg doesn't fit any of that. If you had to say who that candidate is, you'd say it's Buttigieg. So, you know, I don't worry about Bloomberg at all. He's very much untested in terms of this debating. You know, you need to dominate those debates, as Trump did for the Republican nomination 4 years ago. So we'll see how Mini Mike goes on the stage with his little box.
Well, because also, I mean, he's a cranky little bugger, and that's the thing is that when Trump was able to win over with humour, with bluster, and also, let's be honest too, for want of a better term, he helped represent talk radio culture in the United States. All of its talking points, all of its ways and mannerisms. Bloomberg, I just can't imagine him setting a world on fire. He'll be able to buy an awful lot of people. He is awkward, but you know, money seems to be able to cover up those things that in the past would have been scandalous. But in the end, I think Mark's absolutely right about the 1% issues.